After Ole Miss, white racial violence in Mississippi got even worse, and a man named Medgar Evers was one of the first victims. Evers was field secretary of the NAACP in Mississippi and the father of 3 children. In May of 1963, Medgar Evers led a boycott of white-owned businesses in downtown Jackson.
Don't shop for anything on Capitol Street. Let's let the merchants down on Capitol Street feel the economic pinch.
Evers was protesting discrimination against African Americans in hiring and the poor treatment blacks usually got from white store owners.
I had one merchant to call me, and he said, I want you to know that I've talked to my national office today, and they want me to tell you that we don't need nigger business.
As Evers and the local NAACP turned up the pressure in Jackson, the city's mayor went on a local pro-segregation TV channel, WLBT, to attack Evers and his movement. Evers requested equal time to reply to the mayor, and he got it. The Federal Communications Commission in Washington ordered WLBT to give Evers 17 minutes of airtime, the exact amount that mayor had been on the week before. So on a spring evening in 1963, Evers appeared on television and told Mississippians in a calm voice that it was time for change in Mississippi. What does the Negro want, he said? He wants to get rid of racial segregation in the state because he knows it has not been good for him nor the state. No recording of Evers' broadcast seems to have survived, but WLBT did record phone calls that were made to the station while Evers was on the air.
WLBT.
Is the Price is Right not going to be on?
It'll be joined about 17 minutes after the hour.
Well, heck, you going to put that nigga on then?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, good evening.
Thank you. WLBT.
Why don't y'all get that damn nigger off television?
We're required by the FCC to make time available for this broadcast tonight.
When Evers was on television, why, this was unprecedented.
Historian John Dittmer has studied the civil rights movement in Mississippi.
Because they had not even seen what the rest of the country had seen. Prominent black activists who had a point of view and who were not deferential.
The program manager at WLBT was a leading member of the Citizens Council. He routinely blocked out network news coverage of civil rights issues. Sometimes in the middle of a program, the screen would suddenly read technical difficulties.
It had to be quite a shock because they had never seen anything like this.
WLBT.
We'd like for you to take that tape off of that nigger, please.
Ma'am, we are required to run this under our license commitments with the FCC.
What are you people of Mississippi going to do? Just stand by and let the niggers take over?
You know this black son of a bitch that's on television?
Yes,
He's been on more than goddamn 17 minutes. They better get his black ass off or I'm going to come up there and take him off.
Well, sir, we're required to do this.
Oh, no, this is in the South. This is below the Mason-Dixon line. You don't have to put these black jungle bunnies on TV.
It's doubtful Medgar Evers heard the calls that came into WLBT, but he knew he was a marked man.
I had a number of threatening calls, people calling me saying that they were going to kill me, saying that they were going to blow my home up, and saying that I only had a few hours to live. I said, well, whenever my time comes, I'm ready.
Evers' time came just 3 weeks after appearing on Mississippi television. On June 11, 1963, Medgar Evers went to a voting rights rally in Jackson. His wife, Merle, stayed home and watched President Kennedy on national TV. The president had submitted landmark civil rights legislation to Congress, sparked in part by violence against blacks in the South. As Medgar Evers steered his car into the driveway, Merle and the 3 children were waiting inside their home.
We heard him get out of the car and the car door slam, and in that same instance we heard the loud gunfire.
An assassin hiding in a honeysuckle bush shot Evers in the back with a high-powered rifle.
The children fell to the floor as he had taught them to do. I made a run for the front door, turned on the light, and there he was.
Evers was laying face down, bleeding heavily. Neighbors sped him to the hospital, but he died on the way. Medgar Evers was 37 years old. A member of the Mississippi Citizens Council, Byron De La Beckwith, was charged with the murder. The council set up a defense fund for De La Beckwith. Governor Ross Barnett made a trip to court to shake his hand. De La Beckwith was tried twice, and both times the all-white jury deadlocked, provoking a mistrial. De La Beckwith's fingerprints were on the murder weapon, and still he went free. Some 30 years later, Byron De La Beckwith was tried again, convicted of murder, and sentenced to life in prison. He died in 2001 at the age of 90.
The cows. Justice Gus T Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of racism, white supremacy. Today's date, Thursday, January 10th, 2012. So I have been told. We will be back tomorrow. That would be Friday, January 11th, our 6th study session on George Orwell's 1984. Getting to the juicier bits of the book. We still have a good ways to go before the conclusion. That'll be tomorrow evening, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, and 4 p.m. Pacific. George Orwell, 1984. The sound clip that you heard at the beginning of the broadcast is from about an hour radio broadcast. You can catch it online. The title is State of Siege, Mississippi Whites and the Civil Rights Movement. Really interesting broadcast. It is available for free online. You can go to American Radio Works. You can access it there. You can also go to prx.org. They have it available there as well in its entirety. Very interesting piece talking about the way that white people being dedicated to the system of white supremacy, and they use the term white supremacy in that segment, and talking about different things that they did to organize and maintain their system and fight against efforts to change the way they wanted to practice racism, white supremacy in the state of Mississippi. Also, the segment where Medgar Evers, lots of respect for the work of Mr. Medgar Evers, where he was on television. He was given 17 minutes of rebuttal time, and you heard the phone calls from the white people. I thought that was even profound, hilarious, many things, that they do not have recordings of what Mr. Evers said while he was on TV, but they do have recordings of the white people who called in to call him all sorts of jungle bunnies and niggers and all that. But that reminded me of just a couple weeks ago, the audio segment that you heard. That's from the early 1960s. Just a couple weeks ago, you had the exact same thing when President Obama interrupted the football game on Sunday, and he was talking about the shooting in Connecticut, and you had an explosion online of white people calling him a Nick, saying the exact same thing. That was profound for me on many levels. At any rate, recommended by our guest for today's program. She was, I found out about her from our guest from last week, Che Abram, victim of racism, white supremacy. She was saying that she saw one of her lectures, and she said that several of the things that our guest for today's program said stuck with her, and she thought that she was being pretty accurate in her description of how racism works and what it means to be a white person. Our guest for today's program is a nationally known consultant who has focused more than 35 years on organizational change, diversity, and white privilege. Author of Diversity in the Classroom and Understanding White Privilege, Creating Pathways to Authentic Relationships Across Race. Our guest, she was also recently named a pioneer of diversity by Profiles in Diversity and a legend of diversity by the International Society of Diversity and Inclusion Professionals. I think that is probably a record for the number of times I have said the word diversity in one program. You can get more information. You can visit her website. It should be linked in the description for folks who do not have access to the description. The address is franceskendall.com. That would be FrancesKendall.com. www.franciskendall.com. So it's www.franciskendall.com. Real pleasure to have her joining us live for the broadcast. Our guest, Dr. Frances Kendall. Dr. Kendall, are you with us?
I am.
Outstanding. Glad you could hang out with us a bit for your Thursday evening.
Yes, indeed.
Just for any of our listeners, this might be their first time hearing about your work. Is there anything that you think they should know about you before we get started?
It's hard to pull me back to me. I was really caught by the segment that you. So I will say a few things about myself in just a sec. But I was really, really caught by the segment from the radio program, and then in my head, thinking exactly what you talked about was the whole notion of, I'm sure there are many people who would say, well, that was then, and isn't everything better? And then what the calls about having a football game interrupted so that President Obama could talk about the murder of children in Connecticut. I don't have any way to hold that. I don't understand. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. Even if you take President Obama out of it and not wanting to know about the shooting of those children. And so it's, I was shaking my head as I listened, and it is, in that way, that part is really, I think, such an example of our pathology, of the pathology of white people and what we have to do to stay in that place. I'm a white, 65-year-old Southerner. I grew up in Waco, Texas. I have been working on issues of white privilege really since probably I was about 20, and so it's more like 45 years. I've been consulting on issues of whiteness and white privilege for formally for about 35 years. I was interested in what you had to say about that was probably the most times you'd mentioned the word diversity in that kind of short time period. And I think that that's one of the things that is interesting to look at, is the fear of talking about and labeling white supremacy, and how initially the focus on diversity, I think, had to do with creating more diverse institutions, more than numbers, but also creating hospitable climates. And I think now it has backed off to being just about numbers. So there, we watch as words come in and out. So those are my immediate and initial thoughts as I listened to how we started up.
Wow. Appreciate that. I'm sure we'll get more details as we get further along into the program. I would just remind listeners, program again intended for non-white listeners worldwide, victims of racism, white supremacy worldwide. Very important what you just said. I think if you are a non-white person and you are attempting to be honest about the problem we face with regards to the system of white supremacy, you should never be surprised or confused, caught off guard about white people practicing racism. I wouldn't care if it's 2013, 2040, if the system of white supremacy is still in effect. That is something that should never surprise you. As Dr. Kendall said, the pathology of white people that produces the racist conduct, like what was directed at President Obama, most recently with the Connecticut shootings and him disrupting their ball game. You should understand this is to be expected as long as the system of white supremacy exists. You've already shared you are a white woman, correct?
I am.
Hang on.
I am, through and through.
This
And
broadcast.
I have people say, well, you're not really white, sort of like, people talk about black and brown and people particularly as not being really black, or you're not really Latino. You're not really white because you have these other ideas. And I think, in fact, it's really important to understand that there are many of us who are white who have spent our lives working on eradicating institutional racism, really studying and working on to eradicate the supremacy of whiteness, understanding it better so that we can address it more accurately and more powerfully. And so I'm white, and as I said, through and through. That is my experience. It also means that I am, in many situations, I miss things because, as Charles Mills says in The Racial Contract, which is a terrific book, built into the racial contract of the supremacy of whiteness are structured blindnesses and opathies. And I hadn't heard the word opacity used in that context, and so I looked it up, and it meant dullness of mind. So I think that part of what happens in white supremacy is that there is, because of that dullness of mind, there are times in which no matter how much we've worked, no matter how much we've thought about it, no matter how many experiences, etc., that white people have had, there are ways that are built into the system to keep us from seeing the whole thing. Let me give you an example.
If I could pop in really quick, if that's acceptable.
Yeah. Please.
I wanted to just point out a pattern for our listeners. I guess two things. Number one, Charles W. Mills, The Racial Contract. He's been a guest on the program. You can get the archives, December 2009. We discussed his book and his view on whether or not white people are going to change. That is also a pattern. I think if you listen to the program on a regular basis, white people quoting non-white people. I feel like I said this recently. White people quoting non-white people, in my view, when this is done, if you are a non-white person, you really got to pay attention, because it's been my experience. When white people begin to quote a non-white person on racism, white supremacy, I'd say about 80% of the time they are saying something that's not true. That has been my experience. That's what I've seen on the program. That's what I've seen in real life. They are using a victim of racism to posit or give out information that's not accurate, but it's reference to the non-white person. So it's not even that you're going at them and saying you said something or you're presenting something, because they're quoting or referencing a non-white person. I've seen that consistently, and I'll just get my sound clip in.
If anyone is ignorant about racism, it's black people.
Yeah, the whole notion that white people are somehow ignorant or unaware or have a blind spot, I definitely have serious issues with that, but we can touch on that. I wanted to get the definition of racism nailed down really quick before we get any further in the conversation, because I think that's super important. I use the term racism, white supremacy. I think it's very important. As we discussed on the phone, words, definitions, super important. My definition for both racism and white supremacy, as I said, I use those two terms as synonyms. My definition for both terms, a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. Do you believe that such a system exists, and do you think that's an accurate definition?
I was just writing down some of what you said, Gus. So, dedicated to abusing and last word you said.
Abusing and or subjugating.
And or subjugating non-white or people of color. Is that what you said?
I did not say people of color. I don't use that term.
No, that was me.
Okay. I said a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white.
Yeah. Well, I haven't heard the word that I'm struggling with here is dedicated, and the notion of individuals focusing on that, dedicating their lives to abusing and or subjugating. And for me, I guess, for me, the definition of white supremacy is really systemic. And so I believe that there are people with her who literally sit around and figure out what to do to keep people of, my words, to keep non-white people in positions that are powerless. Michelle Alexander talks about Reagan setting up a drug czar when in fact in her book, The New Jim Crow, when in fact drugs were being less used. He set up a drug czar so that they could go after black men, and my hunch is after black men who were most powerful in neighborhoods, and imprison them. It's the prison industrial complex, the pipeline from elementary school, and we could talk about all of this stuff, kindergarten, all the way through to prison. So do I believe that, I had never thought about whether or not I believe that all white individuals are consciously dedicated.
I just want to point out, I want you to finish, but I just want to point out that I did not say all white people, and I did not use the term conscious. Just want to point that out.
Okay, no, I know that. Okay, so let's go back. So, because for me, it's not about excusing white people. It's not about letting white people off the hook. And I do believe it's a global system. I don't know about the dedicated part. And I know that you didn't say all white people. I tend to talk about all white people as being racist. I believe we are by definition. We probably are also bigoted, prejudiced, etc., but because we have access to power and resources and the ability to influence, I think that makes us racist in the system of white supremacy. And I hear white people struggle with that all the time in my presence, and or tell me that I'm dead wrong. So I think I think your definition is a really interesting one that I am going to spend some time thinking about. And probably in the next, hour, I'm going to spend some time thinking about it. And I think words are I, with you, think words are really important. I don't know, jump in and tell me sort of where that sits with you.
It's pretty standard. I think people who have listened to this program and heard some of the different white people who have been on, they can predict when you said that you had a problem with a word. I'm sure people who listen to the program, I almost unmuted my line to say dedication. It's pretty standard from what I've heard. White people, some of them who've come, I think Ian Hani Lopez, I told you he had been on the program. That was a big problem he had. He said, that word dedication, and you make it seem as if white people are conscious and they're knowingly going around and doing these things. And we started getting into his book, and it was early on in the book. White by Law, fantastic book. I would highly recommend and check out the program where...
Well, and those laws...
hang on one second. Hang on. Thank you. See, that exactly. When Mr. Lopez was on the program, he used the word committed. And I just said, bold print that, highlight it, committed. I think that is synonymous with dedication. And in my view, we really, and I'm just talking about non-white people, we really have got to stop pussyfooting and using words that are not clear, that are not accurate. We really have got to make this simple and to the point and accurate, not just making it simple and compromising the accuracy. Make it simple and accurate so that everybody understands what we're talking about and what we mean when we say racism. And in my view, the dedication aspect, and that's also consistent. White people consistently, immediately tie the dedication to whether or not white people are conscious. I would simply say, I think the record shows you cannot be a white person and be ignorant about racism, white supremacy. You will get in trouble with other white people if you violate the laws of how you are supposed to function as a white person in a system of white supremacy. And I think you talked about some of those examples.
That's absolutely right.
Okay.
Yep. That's absolutely right.
Right on. That's what I'm saying. And in fact, I will pitch back to you on this one. And I will also request if you can make an effort, because this is one of the ways that I had seen white people, and I suspect that it's conscious. This is one of the ways that I've seen white people practice racism, white supremacy, willfully, is using a lot of words, pussyfooting, being very circumloquacious, so that they just talk and talk and talk in buckets and buckets. We really haven't gotten any clarity. The question hasn't been answered. We've moved so far away from the subject that sometimes people have forgotten what the original question was. That's something that I've seen as a consistent pattern amongst white people, and I think it's deliberate. So if you could be concise with your words and accurate. I don't want you to compromise the accuracy and thoroughness of your response, but not going overboard with the words. I will pitch back to you because I think this really gets to the crux of the matter about dedication, about whether or not they're conscious. What does it mean to be a white person? That's one of the integral chapters in your book on understanding white privilege. What does it mean to be a white person, Dr. Kendall?
Well, I think for us, I think for white people, what it means is that we, what you just said is a really important piece, which is that when we break the rules or go out of the parameters of systemic racism, white supremacy, we are immediately pulled back in to say, oh, no, you can't do that. And so I think for us, being white means that, or being who we are, means that we make the rules, that we get to say what is right and what is wrong, that we get to determine what is history and what is not, who is valuable and worthy and who is not. And that goes from groups of people to individuals. I think being white means that we believe that it is appropriate that we make the decisions, that it is appropriate that we are the heads of organizations, virtually all organizations, and that there's nothing, it's like, well, so why is that a big deal? That's just who's there. Well, no. That is who we have there to keep our systems in place. That is who we have put there to keep our systems in place. I think white means, I mean, we could go on for, 1,000 examples. I think being white means that we don't ever hold ourselves responsible for what is, for changing. I was interested in your question about will white people change. I don't have any idea, and I'm usually not very sanguine about it. Do we have the will? I don't think so. Being white means I can determine that. Being white means I can determine what language is appropriate and what language isn't, and whose language is valued and whose language isn't. Being white means that I don't have to take responsibility for my own behaviors, and I can determine what happens to non-white people so that they are forced to take responsibility for behaviors that they often haven't committed. Being white means that I get to decide who will and will not be hired. Being white means that I get to decide how that person will be paid. And being white means that I will be able to move far more quickly into positions of power. That I am in positions, or that we are in the positions of writing rules. Being white means that I can sit in a public space and say to a president of the United States, you lie, and I'm not dragged out of there. And in fact, many people congratulate me for finally telling the truth. No sense, meaning saying being white means that I can spit on a congressman and brave and courageous civil rights activist and not ever be held accountable for that, and in fact, not even really have people stop to look at it. Being white means that I'm not arrested for things that non-white people are arrested for every day. Chances are good that I won't be set up to be arrested. And in fact, when police officers pull me over, I mean, the treatment of white people by police is entirely different. So that if I'm pulled over in a neighborhood, chances are exceedingly good that I will be pulled over and the police officer will ask me what I'm doing in that neighborhood. Don't you know you're not safe? Being white means that I'm not followed around in stores. Being white means that I am believed even if I'm not telling the truth. And I think that specific one is really varies often in regard to socioeconomic class. White upper class and upper middle class people are believed regardless. And whether we are lying or not, whether everybody knows that we're lying or not, it stands. Things that you're watching the election process leading up to the election this year, and Mitt Romney knew that he was lying about a host of things. That, lying was the new way to do it. President Obama could never have done that.
Right. I wanted to hop in there for a second. I think with regards to white people being able to do all these things, whether it's lie or whether they're stopped by enforcement officers, the police, and they are not arrested or detained, they certainly have a safer interaction when dealing with enforcement officers than what happens with many black people, Rekia Boyd, Abner, Louima, many others. I think that goes back to what you were talking about initially with regards to what it means to be a white person. White means boss, in charge. I'm supposed to be leading. I'm supposed to be telling folks what to do. I'm supposed to be dictating what happens. That's what it means to be white. That goes, and I think most white people understand that. I think even some of the racist jokes that I've heard from white people, one of the ones that I remember a white person telling, this was a white teenager, not a 67-year-old grizzled white person in Mississippi. This was a white teenager in Washington State who said, what do you call one white man and 10 black guys? He said, quarterback. He said, what do you call one white man and I think it was 500 or a bunch, hundreds of black people? He said, warden. And I said, the racist jokes, they reveal a whole lot about racism. White supremacy is exactly what you said. I'm white, I'm supposed to be in charge. It doesn't matter what the setting is, whether it's athletics, whether it's in battle, whether it's in business, all areas of people activity. White means boss. I'm in charge, I'm supposed to dominate, I'm supposed to be the supreme person with regards to what happens between people. That is pretty much exactly what I'm saying, and I'm saying that if you're a white person, you are supposed to know that from a very early age. You are supposed to understand that. With regards to how you relate to the people who are not white, you are supposed to be telling them what to do. They are not supposed to be dictating things to you as a white person, and I'm pretty sure most white people, if not all, know that, white children included. The other thing that I think is super important is Dr. Frances Kendall, which I hope listeners caught. She did not say a word about skin color, which is super important. I have pointed out consistently when individuals who classify themselves as white, they are not white. If we're talking the color white, we're talking the color of snow or whatever, notebook paper, whatever that you can think of that is a representative of white, that is not the skin color of individuals who say they are white. And many white people, in my view, will consciously practice racism, white supremacy by trying to get non-white people to think. When you say, well, are you a white person? They will say, oh, hey, my skin is what, can't you see? You know, hey, and they'll point at this, and that's not what they're talking about at all. They're talking about exactly what Dr. Kendall just laid out, a worldview with regards to how I'm supposed to relate to individuals we say are not white, a power relationship.
Right, and we decide.
Exactly. And
so that sorry.
I was just going to
I was going to say immediately after 9/11, Arabs became not white. When before, periodically, they were seen as white people. And after 9/11, we decided that they were dark-skinned people, or that they were not white. And so then we could go to war against them and make it clear that they were our enemies.
Sand niggers.
I think it would have been really interesting to see what would have happened had the people who took planes into the World Trade Tower been from Germany.
Oh, it would have been a totally different story. I'm sure we would not have invaded Germany, and you would not have. We would have had a totally different world. You can even look.
That's right, and we would have figured out how it was. We would have figured out how the people who did that were psychotic individuals.
Absolutely. You can even. I would encourage folks. You can go back and research the Norway shooting when they were confused at first, and they didn't know it was Breivik, the white male, when they thought that this was some sand niggers. You can just look at the language that would, oh my God, it was a terrorist attack. And then when it was Breivik, it was, oh, this is not terrorism. This is just, some crazed white person who has some problem. Totally different language, words, very different set of words used when white people go out and commit these crimes. The next thing that I wanted to get at, which I also think is super important, and which is why there shouldn't be a lot of beating around the bush with the terms and trying to act as though there are a lot of white people who are going to change their ways and they're going to stop practicing white supremacy racism. You said that you are less than sanguine about the prospects of white people voluntarily desisting with regards to the practice of white supremacy racism. Now, if you say that, if I'm understanding correctly, meaning you are not very hopeful that white people are going to let go of the practice, the belief in racism, white supremacy. If that's the position that you've taken, and I certainly have taken that position, I have not seen any evidence that white people are going to stop practicing racism, white supremacy. I believe when we spoke last week, you said that you are still a racist white supremacist. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
By definition.
By definition. Mm-hmm. Just for non-white people, I think that it is extremely important to grasp that when doing this work, because I've seen consistently where non-white people seem to believe or want to believe or hope or are confused in thinking that, yes, if we just have enough of these seminars, if Dr. Kendall can just write some more books, if Timothy Wise or Dr. Peggy McIntosh, if they can write some more books, if we can have some more conferences, if we can just get this info out to enough white people, they will stop. They will change their ways, and they will no longer be racist. And I've just concluded that nothing could be further from the truth. It seems that we have agreement there as well. Is that true?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It is.
Right. Did you want to?
I believe that my task is to do more and more, give white people the opportunity to know more and more about how white supremacy works, and with my hope that something will flip a switch. Do I really think that, generally speaking, that will happen? No. Have I watched white people think about things differently over time? Yes, I have. But I still believe that as a group, we simply don't have the will. We don't have the cultural will to do it, because it would mean turning upside down our understanding of how things work, how the world works. And it would mean for every individual, now, so I'm moving now from systemic level to the personal level, it would mean holding what our group behaviors have done to non-white people over history. And moving from, has every white person, did every white person enslave black people in the Civil War? No, of course not. They're white people who were born yesterday afternoon. If you were in Russia when that happened and then you came to the United States, did you enslave black people? No, you were in Russia. But the fact is that when you come here, your whiteness, and in some instances your skin color, I guess, that sort of dusty pink, gives you benefits, unearned benefits, that other immigrants do not get. And if we're not clear about that, we can simply look at the differences between the experiences of Central Mexicans and Central and South Americans as immigrants, legal or not, and Irish people as immigrants, legal or not, in 2013. They're entirely different events. We're not looking to arrest Canadians who come into this country. We haven't spent the, probably now billions of dollars fencing in deserts on our northern boundary as we have on our southern boundary and particularly southwest boundary. So when we talk about illegal immigrants, it's code. We all know what that means. It does not mean Irish or Canadian or British or Germans. but what it means is Mexicans and people from Mexico and Central and South America. It's just code. It means, that's what we're looking at.
I would certainly say I think most non-white people are confused, so I think there are a lot of non-white people who do not understand that is coding for non-white people that we don't want in this area of the world. I will double-check, see if our co-host Justice has some questions. I'll also give out the numbers so that listeners, if you all have some questions you would like to ask Dr. Francis Kendall, the number to dial is 760-569-7676, and the code is 564-943#. Press star 6 if you have a question you would like to ask. I will hit the phone lines once we're done. Give us a little time once Justice is finished up with her questions and what have. Let's see, Justice, if you have some questions for Dr. Kendall, your line should be open. Please proceed.
Can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Greetings, Dr. Kendall. What is your definition of diversity?
Well, I think diversity is a really political term. It has changed definitions over time, and I think it is essentially. I think now it's being used to talk about non-white people who don't have power, people who don't have privilege. So I think now diversity is being used as a way to group non-white people, non-straight people, so LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender people, non-wealthy people, people who have disabilities, people who are not Christian. I'm missing something. Men, women, as a way of saying we as white people, want more of them in our organization. Now, the next piece, so I think that, I'm just being careful here where Gus says, so just, stop before you go on to the paragraph. I think that's what diversity is being used as today, in the last, say, 10 or 15 years.
What do you use, why do you use the term white privilege more than white supremacy?
I don't think they're the same. I think white privilege is a tendril of white supremacy. That one of the ways that white supremacy is kept in place is that people who are white are granted unearned privileges, access to resources, ability to influence, access to power in ways that no one else is. So if I'm talking about the global system, am I talking about white privilege? No, I'm talking about white supremacy. And so for me, white privilege is a way to clearly identify ways in which our experiences as white people are really different. I also think I began talking about white privilege at a time when the phrase white supremacy, and so let's say 30 years ago, when the phrase white supremacy really the picture that was brought into people's minds was that of Klan members and individual white supremacists whose stated life purpose was to eradicate black and brown people. And so I think that I have kept that that language because I think that it's when I talk about white privilege, I find white people saying, I don't know what you're talking about. Although I think, as Gus said, we know really clearly what we are talking about. And I think being able to delineate those is really important. And that white privilege is a supporter, a buttress of white supremacy. Does that make sense?
It'll work, I guess. I mean, I mean, you know, it's a system of white supremacy. What is your definition of white privilege?
Well, my definition of white privilege is unearned benefits granted to white people on the basis of being white. I am treated differently as I apply for a job, even if I am not as qualified. That's an unearned benefit of being white. I am treated differently in stores. I'm treated differently in whether that's, grocery, any kind of stores. I'm treated differently on airplanes. I'm treated differently as I vote. I'm treated differently as I interact with white people or as I interact with non-white people. And and all of that has nothing to do with whether I'm a good person or not. It has only to do with being white. So that if we, it's the easy examples are looking at people like Bernie Madoff, who wrecked hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people's lives with his Ponzi schemes. Or Ken Lay at Enron, and has never been held accountable. And Ken Lay died, I won't go into whether, fortuitously is what I would say, but with tongue-in-cheek, I think, maybe not, but so that he didn't have to be responsible.
What do you mean?
I don't think that.
What is your definition of benefit?
Of benefit?
Yes.
It's something that I get that makes my life easier. It's something that I get that is withheld from others to make my my rise in a workplace quicker. It is something that I get because I'm seen as a worthy human being.
Do you think that...
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Do you think that white supremacy helps you live your life better?
Oh, I think it helps me live my life more easily. Absolutely. In a host of ways, in uncountable ways. And I could give you, probably hundreds of examples of what those ways are. Absolutely.
Can you give at least three?
Sure. When I was applying for graduate schools, I'm dyslexic, and which means that I have difficulty reading. So my scores on tests, which are, I think, absurd, that's a whole other conversation, are not great. I was, and so my scores on my SATs and my GREs were under a combined score of 1,000, which is pitiful. Most colleges and universities don't even look at applicants with scores under 1,000, usually with under 1,200 or 1,500. So bearing that in mind, bearing in mind that I had gone to, and this is for graduate school, that I had gone to a graduate school, Bank Street College of Education, that had no grades. And so I had no grades, and I had pitiful GREs. And I was accepted and I had people who were really behind me who were well known in the field in which I was, which was child development, developmental education, etc. And I was able to be accepted at Harvard, at UMass Amherst, and at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. So what I could say is that was just luck. Or I could be honest and say that has everything to do with my being white. And I believe my being white and being upper middle class, because I had been trained in being raised as an upper middle class person. I had been trained to interview well. I had been trained to be able to be articulate. Articulate. White people are expected to be articulate. Certainly, upper class or upper middle class white people are expected to be articulate. And when, particularly black people, are articulate, the question that's always commented on. Oh, isn't she articulate? As though it were a surprise.
I saw the term.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm going to go on to my next question. I've seen the terms diversity and white privilege all over your website. How do the terms diversity and white privilege work to confuse people who are not white, non-white people?
Oh, that's interesting. I think that the term diversity, when organizations use that term, lead non-white people to hope that white people are serious about changing their organizations to become, quote-unquote, more diverse. And so I think that's confusing because when you're told that when you're encouraged to apply for a job, whether it's the comment is about the goals of making an organization more diverse or through affirmative action, that it's confusing because it raises the hopes of non-white people. I think that the term white privilege is confusing to non-white people, and I'm thinking specifically of a classroom a university classroom in which some black students asked me, it was a great experience, and they said, why do I need to read your book? I already know this already. And it was right at the time of the beginning of the foreclosures and all of that event. And I said, actually, I think if you had I said, you don't have to read my book, certainly. I think that white supremacy and white privilege are so sophisticated in their details that the more that we know about it, the clearer we are able to spot what's happening. So people, non-white people who were applying for housing loans and being pushed to take housing loans that were not appropriate for them because they didn't have enough money to back up their ability to pay for the house, they were cajoled in many instances into taking subprime loans instead of taking regular loans, which in fact they were qualified for. So I think that if one understands how white supremacy and white privilege work, it would have been clearer that the people pushing those loans did not at all have the best interests of the non-white people at heart. They had the best interest of white corporations, the white corporate world, and when they were white, of making their own money, and probably also some non-white people of being able to get rich on the backs of non-white people who were being given those loans. I think that's confusing.
Since you say that white people work to maintain white supremacy, what do you do that is helping to ensure white supremacy?
Oh, lots. What do I personally do to reinforce white supremacy? Is that your question?
I'm sorry, can you repeat it?
Yeah. Is your question, what do I personally do to reinforce white supremacy?
What do you yes.
There are all kinds of ways in which I personally reinforce white supremacy. Probably how I look at white street people and how I look at non-white street people. How I probably call on white people in an audience unless I am intentionally paying attention to everyone in the audience, and also calling on people of color. My frame is whiteness, and my frame is white supremacy. It's how I see the world. And I reinforce that. I reinforce that in my language. I reinforce that in my appreciation of grammar. I reinforce that in
You're just saying
in my behaviors. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Justice. Did you ask a different question?
Oh man, that's hilarious. Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry.
Because there was an echo there, and I didn't hear you.
Oh man, I am cracking up. That is hilarious. I'm sorry. That was just a skit or something like that. You can go and finish.
I reinforce it when I choose where I live. I reinforce white supremacy when I choose who to hire. I reinforce white supremacy when I choose neighborhoods, and friends. I reinforce white supremacy when I choose restaurants. I reinforce white supremacy all day long. It is my frame. I am part of what keeps it in place. And historically, as white women, we reinforced the supremacy of whiteness by trading on our whiteness, for example, to get the vote for white women, and that's exactly what we were looking at. And so I use my whiteness when I stand up to talk about white privilege. Because if I were an African American and as blunt as I am, the same is true for Tim Wise, the same is true for Peggy McIntosh. If I were as blunt, or if we were as blunt as we are, particularly I think Tim and me, and we were black or brown, we would be in really serious danger in ways that we're not in danger now. And I think, I know that Tim is periodically in danger of his life. I don't think that I have that kind of, I'm not known nearly as well as he is. But I have experienced times when I've been followed out of a place where I've been talking and thought, you know, you've always said that you would die for this work. If that's what it meant, that's what you do, and this is the time it's going to happen. So there are all kinds of ways in which I personally reinforce white supremacy.
That will be all for now.
Okie doke.
Context of White Supremacy. I will give out the number. Folks have questions, they can chime in. I wanted to ask, that was on my list. I was glad you touched on that, the role that white women play in maintaining the system of white supremacy. You have that on your website, franciskendall.com, where I guess that's one of the lectures or topics that you can discuss with people, the role of white women in keeping the system of whiteness in place. I would say system of white supremacy. But before I get to that, I just wanted to make a statement for the record. Jane Elliott, she's been on the program as well, admitted racist white supremacist. She said doing this work as a white person, as an admitted racist, that it does not take any courage for her to go out and do this. She's white. She is well protected. It's very different for her to go out and do these things, say what she says when she talks about racism, as opposed to a black person, Medgar Evers, for example, Dorothy Height, going out. They have a very different struggle, very different challenge as a black person trying to go out and say the same thing. I have no evidence. I've seen Tim Wise in person. He's been on this program numerous times. He's an admitted racist. I have seen zero evidence that his life is in danger. I would be stunned if anything happened to Timothy Wise like what happened with Medgar Evers. And just as a black person, as a victim of racism, that was a bit nauseating, almost, I would say, offensive, even at the suggestion that Timothy Wise is somehow in danger. He's making a lot of money. He said he came on this program. He said he makes anywhere $6,000 to go out and speak. I don't see any danger around that at all. He looks like he's doing very well, confusing a lot of people and getting people to think that he is not a racist when he admitted on this broadcast that he is. I just wanted to make that statement. Again, the memory of Medgar Evers, someone who was definitely in danger for the work they did against racism. But I did want to get very important, I think, because one of the things that you said that I do think is really important, that term diversity, that white people have changed the definition of the term, what they mean when they use that term, so that now you might think that it's about racism, but it's extended to, well, we got to make sure that we have Christians, and we got to make sure we have Buddhists and females, and poor people and blah, 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 and just all the way down the line so that you can be confused into thinking that when someone says diversity, they're about racism when they are not. And I think one of the ways that this works is that people, non-white people end up thinking that white women are not racist. They're not white supremacists, that they're victims of this too. And I think that is extremely dangerous. I think that white women play a pivotal role in maintaining the system of white supremacy. As a white woman, admitted racist, can you give us some of that? And try to be as honest, as clear, without beating around the bush. Can you give us some of the best illustrations of how white women are vital in maintaining this system?
Well, I think I agree fully with what you said, that we are often one of the most dangerous groups of people. And my experience is that non-white people are clear about that. That it is we who are in middle management jobs, for example, through which non-white people have to go to move up in their jobs. We are the middle managers. We are the ones who stand in their way much more than white men, because they're not at those decision-making places. They're at the decision-making places at the top of an organization, generally speaking. I think one of the ways in which I think our access to white men, our intimacy with white men, is another way in which we keep white supremacy in place. Our role, and Ida Hurtado in The Color of Privilege, which is an incredibly important book, talks about this a lot. If I am a heterosexual married to a white man in some position of power, I am the person who is in the role of maintaining our social life. I am the person who is in charge of making connections with other white women who are also the wives of power holders. I am the one who is in charge, generally speaking, of raising white children to believe that they are more worthy than any other children. That role is left to me. I am the one who is in charge of making sure that the people that my children, the other children with whom my children play, or who get invited to my house, or who I get to determine what sports they participate in and with whom. And once again, that keeps me, as a white woman, in charge of keeping the supremacy of whiteness in place. And there are many, many other examples, but let me stop there and see if I've answered at least the question, or if there are other places that you want me to go with it.
I'm just highlighting the last portion of what you said. Very important. I've touched on that before. It is an invaluable role that white women play, being, I think, the primary caretaker, grooming that next generation of racist man, racist woman. That white woman is critical. That's very important, what you just said. I'm not sure, at least my experience has been very different, that non-white people seem to be a lot less suspicious of white women. I think the brutal face of racism tends to be the white man when people think of...
Yes. That's absolutely true. Right. Yes.
Okay. That's been my experience, that non-white people tend to be a lot less suspicious of white women. Although the workplace example that you talked about, that is, I guess if you could talk about that, because I know you've had a lot of listeners who have called in with, once they're starting to become less confused, where they start to see the danger that white women represent in the workplace. If you can give some more illustrations illustrations of how white women practice racism, white supremacy in the workplace, that would be helpful.
Oh yeah, absolutely. In broad strokes, who we hire, how we write job descriptions, how we create departments, how we include or exclude, as Patricia Williams says in The Alchemy of Race and Right, on the turn of a dime, so that I might say to a black woman, "Oh, you know, I never think of you as black," and then in the next breath say, "I wish all black people were like you," so that I am keeping this person. It is really playing with that person's mind. That's my most gracious way of saying it. And so in that sort of broad brush way, in terms of hiring, in terms of creating policies and procedures that organizations follow, I also am able to set up appointments and or set up meetings and forget, in quotes, to send notifications of those meetings to black and brown women. And so to write and this is, you can't miss the intention of this, to write the time for a meeting on the notification that goes to the black woman, and I'm thinking of a very specific case, but I've seen it everywhere, to write the time as later so that black woman comes in late, therefore reaffirming the stereotype that black people are never on time. They're always on, what is called colored people's time. And so the intentionality of walking up to a group of people and introducing them, here I have a group of white people and non-white people, and in the academy, because it's in academic settings that I work most usually. Although I've done a lot of work in the corporate world, I'm more interested in the work in the academy. It's really much more complicated, really, as a system. But to say, meeting some people and saying, introducing another white woman, saying, "Oh, you remember this is Dr. Kendall, or this is Dr. Jones, or this is Dr. So-and-so, and you remember Sharon." So in other words, what I've done, who is a non-white person, so what I've done in that way, in a nanosecond, is to identify who's important and who is not. And it slides incredibly easily off my tongue. And somebody could say, why, it's all of the microaggression stuff. How come you just did that? Oh, that was an accident. I didn't mean to do that. But it really screws up people's minds. Because the expectation, the hope is that white women will be different. Now, my experience with black and brown women is that they are increasingly clear that white women, I've had black and brown women say to me many, many times, white women are the enemy. There's a book that my friend and colleague, Karen Dace, who is the Deputy Chancellor at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, edited, and it's called Unlikely Allies in the Academy. And in that book, and it's a really important book to know because there are lots of people, people of color, black and brown and Asian and Indian women, American Indian women, have written about their experiences with white women. And they go on and on and on. And as white women, I believe we try, first of all, we act really surprised. What, me, the enemy? No, that's our common enemy, the white man. I don't think, that's why I say it doesn't, I don't think it's a surprise. I think it's a disappointment. I think it is in some ways a heartbreak. I don't think it's a surprise. And I think black and brown women and American Indian women in particular, and Asian women, depending on the darkness of their skin and the country from which their ancestors came, frankly, and it makes me really sad to say this, but I think they're crazy to trust white women. I think it takes a lot of testing to see if the white woman is really going to be who she says she is. And my experience is that black and brown folks appropriately put those of us who say we're interested in working against and eradicating white privilege, white supremacy, that we are put through test after test after test after test. Okay, here's what she said. In this situation, is she still going to say that? In this situation, is she still going to say that? Is she going to talk about instances where she screwed up? Is she humble about her self and the ways that, humble and honest in the ways that this white woman talks about being a racist? And does she try to separate herself from other people she identifies as racist? And those tests go on for years. And appropriately go on for years. We are watched, those of us who talk about white privilege and about white supremacy, as we should be watched.
I wanted to make sure I had time to get callers. I do see the folks who have hands. This topic, I think, very important. I've harped on this consistently in saying that those white women are very dangerous. If I guess one last environment where I have seen really white women exert lethal control and influence over other non-white people, and I chose the word specifically, is in environments like the White Privilege Conference and settings where white people and non-white people are gathering to talk about white supremacy, racism. I have seen where white women in those settings, and sometimes they don't have to say anything. They can do a lot in terms of controlling the behavior, the thinking of people without even using any words. Before I hit the phone lines, can you share some of the ways that you have seen, or maybe even yourself have practiced racism, white supremacy in those particular settings?
Oh, absolutely. Seeing myself as an expert and presenting myself as an expert about experiences that non-white people have. I work never to speak for non-white people. I believe non-white people can speak for themselves. That's not my job. I see my job as working with other white people. Not speaking to someone as I pass by, or speaking, or acting dismissive. A turn of phrase or a tone of voice when speaking about that is dismissive and deriding when speaking about a non-white person can stop that person's career in its tracks, because I am believed to know what I'm talking about. I am seen as qualified. I don't have to prove that I'm qualified, whereas I have to prove that I'm not qualified, whereas non-white people have to prove that they are qualified over and over and over and over, regardless of their degrees, regardless of their regardless of who they are. When you mentioned Dorothy Height, and she was really one of my mentors when I was in the National Student YWCA in the mid to late 60s and early 70s.
You're veering off topic a little bit.
Well,
I wanted you to continue.
Just
you veered off a little bit from how white women specifically practice racism in those settings.
Well, that actually, I in my head, there's a connection. And the connection is that Miss Height had to continually assert who she was because the white women were continually telling her that even though she had been hired to be the head of the Office of Racial Justice, that she wasn't doing a good job, or that the white women who worked in that office were doing better jobs. So they were continually undercutting her as an individual and as a professional. And I believe that I do that as well. And I sound, because I'm supposed to know better, supposedly, then my words carry more power and therefore are far more lethal, to go back to your word, or to use spirit murdering Patricia Williams's words. So even a rolling of eyes is withering in a meeting when a black or brown woman says something. Looking at another white woman in the room and sighing. And if a black or brown woman does that to another black or makes eye contact to another black or brown woman, that woman is called on the carpet. She was being disrespectful. She was playing the race card. Nobody says anything to me. I play my race card all the time. All the time. When I come into a room, I am playing my race card. When I sit down at a table of other white people to make decisions, we are playing our race cards. Yet the people that we accuse of playing a race card are always non-white. And if I were going to be brutally honest, and you may have to bleep this out, I don't know. It is really a mind fuck. Because black and brown people want to have someone that they can trust. And white women look more trustworthy. And yet often we are the far more dangerous. Because we are in the position of having to please the person who has the greatest amount of power at the top, which is white men. In ways that white men are not in the position of ever really having to take what white women say into account. It looks nice, but their lives are definitely not dependent on it. And for white women, often certainly their lives, but also their happiness and well-being is dependent on how they are seen by the white men by whom they're surrounded. And that's part of the sickness of those systems. I think women of color in particular have to be very clear that we are lethal. I go back to the word that you used.
Context of white supremacy. Very important. I will hit the phone lines. I see we have lots of callers. There appear to be a lot of people on the line with questions, so if you can, we don't really have time for statements, questions, just asking questions. You have statements or what have you. You can save that for a little later. There are a lot of people who have their hand up with questions, so just keep that in mind. I'm just going to go straight down the line. Caller in Brooklyn, your line should be all open. Caller in Brooklyn, did you have a question for Dr. Kendall?
Greetings. Yes, I do. Thanks for taking my call. Hello, Justice, Gus, and the guest. It's like a two-part question. Earlier you were saying that the way that racism works is that white people create system, like it's like that you were, it basically seemed like you were just saying basically that you project, if I could paraphrase, like you kind of project the racist logic into the world and then force the world to conform to that image. Is that kind of correct?
Yeah, I would probably say to that reality instead of image, but yes.
Right. That's what I mean. Yeah. That's right. Okay. Cool. So then I'm wondering if I mean, because that's pathological. You know, you have people walking around with stuff in their head, and it's just getting poured out into the world in a very real sense, as you said, not an image. It's real.
Right.
So I'm wondering, do you think that like how do you do you think that white people are capable of comprehending what justice is?
Are we capable? Sure. It doesn't seem that difficult to me. It is not, you know, it's not rocket science.
Well, I mean, in a practical sense,
I mean, we are willing? No. I'm sorry?
Yeah, I meant in a I mean, yeah, I guess you answered the question. Like, do you think that white people are capable of actually expressing justice as a condition and not just as lip service? You know, to actually bring about justice in.
I do think we're capable, yes. I don't know that we have the will, but I certainly think we're capable. Just because we are racist doesn't mean that we are necessarily fools. You know, I think we're plenty capable. And we decide whether we're going to do that or not.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Sure, we decide whether we're going to do that or not.
Well, do you think that white people are, like, I think justice is a thing that it's all or nothing. You know, like you can't have a little bit of justice. You know.
Right.
So that's, I guess like the will and the ability, they have to, I guess, both be present. So I guess it's like maybe it's a roundabout question, but do you think that people are capable of even like knowing what such a condition could, you know, like maybe white people don't understand what justice is? Do you think that's a possibility?
I don't think that's true. I think that there are so many glaring examples of injustice that we can't miss that. And there are so many examples that even when they are perhaps one could call them less glaring, they add up. I don't think we can miss that. We have to work really hard not to see it.
What about justice? Not injustice, but justice. Do you think that white people...
And I think that it is, I believe, although I've never been asked this before, I believe that we can understand justice and fairness. I don't believe that we have the will to put that in place.
Very interesting. Thank you very much.
Uh-huh.
That word fair. Let's see. The person who dialed in 6151 6151. Did you have a question for Dr. Francis Kendall? Your line should be open.
Yes. I have 3 questions. The first one is, I'm going to start from the beginning of the conversation. I heard her say at one time Arabs were considered white by racist man and racist woman. Is that true?
I think historically Arabs were not considered by everyone as people of color. Yes.
Oh, okay. Now, are you familiar with the work of Dr. Blumenbach, the guy who came up with the Caucasian, Mongoloid, and Negroid?
Yes. Yep.
So if historically they were never white, why didn't he have them with Caucasians when he was doing the classification?
I'm sorry, why weren't they lumped in with Caucasians?
No, they were never lumped in with Caucasians. They were lumped in with Mongoloids. My question to you is, if they were always looked at as Caucasians, why did Dr. Blumenbach did not classify them as Caucasians during the 1800s?
Well, I think that's an interesting question. I think that who is white, considered white or not, is really a changing event.
Yeah, I don't mean to interrupt you, but as I see now, of course it's a changing event. Saying they was always considered white, but historical evidence shows that white people never considered them as being Caucasian. So, like, my question to you would be like, why all of a sudden it's a urgent need to classify them as Caucasians when they were listed as Mongoloid during the 1800s by German anthropologists? And you could answer that. I have 2 more questions. That's really a minor question.
Okay.
Go ahead, my bad.
I don't think there's an urgent need at all. And yes, they were.
I see it done a lot. You're not the first person I heard say that. And I used to be Islamic, and I was converted by Yemenis and Saudi Arabian Arabs. And I don't even think on their part it was any confusion about they were non-white. In fact, they told me they were black before they went to war with Romans and Greeks. So from the mouth of Caucasians, and that's where I hear that from mostly. I never hear that from the Arabs themselves. I only hear that coming from Caucasians.
That makes sense to me.
Oh, okay. All right, my second question would be, now you said that white women are subjects to white men in the system of white supremacy known as racism. They're subjects to them?
I would say white women are subject to men across race, not in the system of white supremacy, but in the system of male supremacy. White supremacy is tied to male supremacy, is tied to class supremacy, is tied to religious supremacy. There are several interlocking systems of supremacy.
Well, could you explain to me how black males are beneficiaries of a male supremacist society? How do we as black men benefit from male chauvinism in the United States? How do we as black men do that?
I think that black men are used differently by a white system. I'm thinking.
No, excuse me, ma'am. You right now you're confusing me because now you're saying we're being used, but at first you would say we were beneficiaries and we had a system going on called male supremacy. I was asking a direct question: how do black men in the United States benefit from male supremacy? Like how do we benefit over white women in the system of male supremacy as black males?
You are not used as objects of sexualization or brutalization on the basis of your gender.
So when Amadou, not the Amadou Diallo, it might be Amadou Diallo, but I might be mistaken. So when the police in New York in the 90s stuck a stick up a black man's ass, excuse me just for using that word, but stuck a stick up a black man's ass, that is not sexual molestation, brutalization. I'm saying, what type of compassion do you have to say that's not sexual torture done by whites in the system of white supremacy?
I was talking about generally how patriarchy works. Is that sexual molestation, brutal sexual molestation? Absolutely.
Okay, so you are saying that white women are, since you want to group all women together, but let's just say white women, because you are white women, as I understand. So you are not saying that white women are the only one subjected to sexual brutality in the system of white supremacy. Black men are also, and that it is evidence, clear evidence, cutting off of our penises, our testicles. That's sexual brutality. And
yes,
and I don't think it happens. And I don't think it happened to you, white women, as it does to us. I've never seen a white woman swing from a tree with her breast cut off, ever. So please don't make that comparison because it's very offensive. And I don't mean to get so compassionate, but I do take this subject personal. I apologize. My last question to you is, all right. I have one more question, and I'll leave it there. The guy, he was talking about the caller before me. He was saying that do white people have the capacity to understand justice? And the way I heard it was you said that you all have the knowledge to understand what justice is, but you do not have the will to carry justice out. So could that be saying that y'all lack the compassion or the civility to be civilized?
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
That's all. Thanks for answering, Dr. Kendall, and I'm sorry for being so passionate, but I mute my line.
I appreciate your passionateness.
1804. If you had a question, your line should be open.
Yeah, I first of all, I wanted to thank you, Gus, and the guest, because there's been a lot of very constructive information that's come out of tonight's call, specifically about the role.
Could you speak up here? 1804, if possible.
Can you hear me a little? Okay, so I just wanted to thank Gus and thank the guest for all the information that's been shared tonight. I just wanted to ask the guest if there was any way, in light of some of what she's acknowledged, that she could, first of all, do you know Tim Wise?
I do.
Okay. Is there any way for people like you and Tim Wise and all sorts of other people who do the diversity circuit to try and somehow compensate or get together to discuss compensating people like Neely Fuller Jr. and Dr. Francis Greswelsing and Gus for the fact that in very many ways you are usurping their voice, and maybe more Tim Wise than you, in terms of talking about racism and being references in terms of talking about racism in what is a mild imposture, which is also highly remunerated. So is there any way to begin such a conversation? It's one thing to acknowledge it, but where is the compensation going to come from?
Well, I think that absolutely there's a way to have those conversations, and they center around who benefits. They center around accountability. They center around, and I think those conversations happen. I don't think they happen publicly, and I don't know that they happen, or at least they don't happen publicly regularly. And I think that each of us makes decisions personally about what we do with the money that we make, or we make decisions personally about whether we charge for what we're doing at all. So I think that the conversations need to happen more often, and they need to happen more often in public. And I think the decisions about compensation have to do with personally how we use our money, but also how we push our clients and the people who ask us to speak, how we push them to remunerate speakers of color, and why is it that, and ask them questions about why is it that they choose white people to speak rather than asking people of color to speak. So that you push it from a variety of places. I push it from a variety of places. And I often say, why are you asking a white woman? Actually, if it's someone that I don't know, I say white woman. If it's someone I do, I'm often say, well, so why are you asking me as a white girl to come do this?
Well, is there any way that we can get a firm commitment from you that you will try to seriously engage someone like Tim Wise in this kind of compensatory action?
Yes.
Because I mean,
yes.
He's the biggest offender in this department. He's the biggest offender in this department. It's quite offensive because it's complete usurpation in the furtherance of what he claims to be denouncing.
I can tell you, I can give you my word. I actually engage in these conversations with Tim pretty regularly. I can give you my word that I will do that again and more regularly, and that I will do it publicly. At places like the White Privilege Conference. You're welcome.
The person, Bruce Fine, your line should be open.
Good evening, everyone. I have two questions for the guest. The first one is, Doctor, I want you to honestly and to the point, no fluff, in answering these questions. Please be as blunt as you were when you talked about how white people mind fuck your victims. In the global system of racism, white supremacy, please explain why it is crucial for white people to have sex with their melanin victims, to have offspring with your victims, and or adopt the children of your victims. Please explain how these deliberate acts help white people continue to dominate their melanin victims whom white people classify as not white. That's my first question.
I think we benefit, if I understand your question, so I'm trying to be really brutal. I think it is about reasserting and recommitting to the notion of, and I think it is about reasserting and recommitting to the notion of, the one drop of blood rule. That as long as I am having children who are in part non-white, I am putting them in the place of never being able to have access to benefits. I'm participating in that.
So it wouldn't be considered as an art of war to have sex with your victims, to have offspring with your victims, so that there will be a group of people in the category that you classify as not white, who will either not see white people as their oppressor or find it hard to believe that my white mother, my white father is a racist white supremacist.
I think your point is really well made. And I'm a lesbian. And so do I think it's an act of war? I think that's a really important point. And yes, I think it is an act of war. I think it's quite intentional.
Okay, so you would say that these white people, because white people across all income levels sexually sewer their victims, adopt the children of their victims, and have offspring with their victims. So based on your answer, it does sound to me that white people are dedicated. That's a dedication to maintaining the system of racism, white supremacy, and you don't need a degree to do that. You don't need a degree to sexually sewer your victims, to make your victims think that there are some white people who are not racist, who are not dedicated to forever dominating them. But on to my second question. Also explain why white people created the global-wide system of racism, white supremacy in the first place. Why did white people feel the crucial need to have a system where they dominate, abuse, and subjugate everyone whom you guys classify as not white? Why do you guys need this system? Why was it created in the first place?
I think it was created to keep us, I think it's all about power. I mean, I could say all sorts of other reasons, but I think it's all about power.
Right. So why is it that white people need to have this power over everyone and not just exist in a world where there's justice and, peace, in the sense that not peace where war is considered peace from the perspective of a white supremacist, but, justice, peace. Why is that you guys can't do that? Why is that an impossibility? Why is there a need to be powerful, dominate, and subjugate other, people you don't consider white?
I believe that that's at the root of the system of white supremacy. I think there's a pathological need. I also believe, and that's at the individual level, but at the systemic level, I benefit. It's all about greed and power. And so I use other people to do work that I don't want to do, not pay them for their work, essentially, to gain on their backs. And that's part of the way that I keep that in place.
Okay, so the system, and just want to make sure I'm understanding you. So the system of racism, white supremacy is just about greed. White people, in essence, and correct me if I'm misquoting you, are just lazy, and you want other people to do work for you.
Oh, I think
that's it. That's it in a nutshell.
No, that's not it in a nutshell.
Okay.
I think it is way more complicated than that. There's nothing meaning, because you said it's just about. There's nothing, it's way more complicated than that.
Well, you said greed and people working for you, so that's why I was saying, explain, well, what else is it? Okay, if it's not just that, what else is it?
It's being able to determine it's being able to determine history. It is being able to determine in whose hands power rests. It's being able to determine who is considered beautiful and who is not. That's what the caller was talking about from Frederick Blumenthal, I think it is. That might be wrong. Blumenbach. It is determining what the rules of engagement are across the board. It is determining how money flows and how it does not. It is determining how our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, how their power will be kept in place for generations. That's what the Constitution was about, the United States was about, was determining who would maintain power in perpetuity. So there's nothing simple about it. It's a very, we have made it a very complex system. We have created it intentionally with very few loopholes. And the minute that we think there is a loophole, we will stop it.
Okay, so prior to the invention or creation of the system, because you mentioned something about determining who was beautiful and so on and so forth. So prior to this system being created, what was the mindset of white people? Were you feeling that you weren't the most beautiful? Were you feeling that you were at some sort of a deficit in every area of life? That because something had to make white people say, we need to create a system just for us, where we dominate. Something had to bring that mindset about.
I don't know where that is historically. So that, for example, certainly Greeks were thought as being more beautiful than Africans. Before, that is historically way before Blumenbach. And so I think, I don't know the answer to that question. I think it has been there, and I don't know my history. Truth be told, I don't have enough information or knowledge to talk about when that wasn't the case.
Okay. Well, thank you for your responses, and I'm done, Gus.
I wish I had the sound clip of the white male in California when the caller said, "I'm done, I have no further questions." And he said, "But I have more ideas." And he chuckled. That would have been...
No, I didn't hear that.
That was a previous broadcast. That was... I didn't expect you to hear it, but it would have fit beautifully right there.
Yes, it would have.
Mr. Aaron Berg, Reality Unknown. Glad to hear from you, sir. Your line should be open, Mr. Berg.
Yes, it's good to interact with you again, Gus. Hello, Dr. Kendall.
Hello, how are you?
Good. A previous caller expounded on part of my questions, but I'm going to still ask them because I think they're important. Did you say that pre-September 11, 2001, that Arabs were considered white?
Well, I did, but I need to clarify really where all of that came from. And that is, I was thinking about who, and I was speaking about it, but I was clearly, probably I was talking about something about which I don't know, and fully, that history. And second, I was probably speaking too glibly. What I was caught by was that for generations, the people who were identified as the most dangerous were black men for, centuries. Since the beginning, certainly the beginning of this country. And by our, I choose the term carefully, forefathers. And so the people who were seen as least worthy, valuable, etc., were black men. And certainly we are told most dangerous.
Did I also hear you state that post-September 11, 2001, the Arabs were considered non-white? Am I correct?
You did hear, yes. And I think they also moved into being the most dangerous. That is what I think got flipped. And so in bizarre ways, some black people were saying that that it would be okay to racially profile them, to catch them, and to keep us all safe.
Well, my curiosity really piqued when you brought that up. So, tell me, do you know why that is? Why the reversal of fortune? Why did one group all of a sudden change like that? Is that a general consensus from your understanding among people that identify as white?
I do think that for that period, there was a change. I would say that there are regular changes in who is considered white and who isn't. I would say that is not static. I would say that is that changes depending on what is the most expedient for those who are white and making those decisions.
Okay, then my final question or questions. Who do you think perpetrated those events of September 11, 2001? Do you think it was the official version that it was 19 quote-unquote terrorists with box cutters that are now classified as Arabs?
Well, I think it's way more. I am a conspiracy theorist, generally, and I think that. And so the fact is, I don't know. I do think it is particularly interesting that the only plane that was sent out of the country, and it may not have been the only, but I do know that a member of Saddam Hussein's family was sent out of the country for his or her safety in the first couple of days after the September 11th attacks. And that we had been in political bed with people in many Arab countries for a long time. So do I think it was literally only those people who carried that out? I don't know that.
Okay, my final question, and thank you. I'm sorry for cutting you off.
No, certainly it was way more complicated a history than just those 19 people decided that that's what they were going to do that day. I mean, there were Al-Qaeda. There are Al-Qaeda cells of white people, of all sorts of folks all over the world. So I think that there was nothing that was just about those 19.
Okay, then my final question, and thank you for answering my questions. Do you think it's possible that 9/11, those events of September 11, 2001, is not what we are told, and actually it really isn't 19 non-white terrorists with box cutters, and it was probably more succinctly possibly white supremacists that devised it in order to continue their agenda of terrorizing non-white areas of the world, or maybe that, if you think that's a harsh term, continuing the colonization of the planet. Do you think that's possible?
I would never say never. Do I think it's possible? Sure. Do I believe that that's what happened? I don't know enough to know. But do I think it's possible? Sure. I think we'll go to extremes to maintain what benefits us. Look at the lynchings. One in particular where I grew up in Waco, Texas, a lynching in 1906 that was one of the most brutal. So do I think we will go to extremes and do anything we can to maintain what we believe is ours? Look at the bombing of the Birmingham church. Sure. And so I would never say never. Do I think we had the capability to think that up? Sure. Did we in that instance? I don't have enough information to know. But I wouldn't say absolutely not.
Is that satisfactory answer to your question, Mr. Bird?
Yes. Well, if I'm going to hang up now, if she could expound more on the reversal of fortune, which to me is a pun, and I won't, because of the situation with Arabs possibly having natural resources. I'm not saying they control them, but can you please expound on when I asked you why the reversal of fortune? Can you further clarify? You said that sometimes people are categorized differently, whereas before they were categorized as white, and then all of a sudden they were categorized as non-white after September 11th. So can you maybe give more examples? Is that like historical? Has that occurred before in history? And do you think it will occur again? And could you just please expound on that whole scenario?
Sure. Briefly, the example that comes to mind was the treaty. I mean, and I don't know about reversal of fortune. If we were sitting and having a conversation and had time to have the conversation, I would want to know what you mean by that phrase. It wasn't a phrase that I used; it was yours, and I would need to know more. But in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo between the United States and Mexico, which was, I think, 1852. I'm not positive, but it was during the American-Mexican War. Two things were agreed upon. One was that Mexico would give to the United States a huge amount of its country, and in return for doing that, two things would happen. First, that the Mexicans who lived in that area could maintain their property, which of course we reneged on immediately, and second, that they would be considered white. And so we're looking at a group of brown people who were for political expedience, going to be considered white. So when I grew up, so there's an example of someone, and so that's that's in the census of non-Hispanic whites. When I grew up in Texas, I went to school with Mexican kids, but not with black kids. And I think we certainly, how we see people from Mexico and Central and South America changes depending on who you're talking about. Often by class, the lighter the skin, often the higher the class, the socioeconomic class. And I think that's another example where who is what color, who's considered white or not, is changes. People from Cuba who were against Castro call themselves white Cubans. So I think there are a variety of times where we have shifted who was identified as white and who was identified as non-white. And I think there's a whole lot more to say, and the truth is I don't know a whole lot more. Certainly, but it takes us also back to the history of all of the very bad science about who was white, all the looking at skulls. We created that to show that we were superior, and sometimes people who were East Asian were considered white, and sometimes they weren't. Ian Haney Lopez talks about that brilliantly. And there's another example of who's white changes depending on who's going to benefit. It happened also in immigration. Irish, Jewish, people from Eastern Europe. I think it is really throughout our history. So that's, I think, Gus, that there's, there probably are other people who have questions. I'm happy to talk about that a little bit more, but it seems like there probably are other questions as well.
Yes, ma'am. The person that dialed in, Lashes, your line should be open.
Hi, good evening. Quick question. The doctor mentioned that white people do not have the will to practice justice. I want to know if she can expound on why do white women in particular, since they are lethal, deliberately have the will to engage in sexual activities with non-whites to produce offsprings that will be classified as non-white by the system of white supremacy. Why do white women have the will and the drive to procreate children with non-white people and to have sex with non-white people? Why is that will and drive so prevalent with white women?
This is the truth about that question for me. I don't know nearly enough to talk about it. And I think that there are people like Ida Hurtado who have talked about that extensively. And I don't know enough of, and haven't thought enough, really, I guess, as well, about why that's the case to be able to speak very knowledgeably about it. And I think it's really, again, it's really complicated. Is that why? Go ahead.
No, continue.
Well, I was thinking about white families that adopt children from places like Central or South America. In other words, places where or Asia, where the children are not white, and white families adopting from those countries. And I wouldn't say that the reason that they are doing that is to maintain their supremacy, at least not consciously. It may be that that's what they're doing. I think, however, that after that, the question of intention is really clear in terms of how they raise children, how they raise the children. Do they raise the children to be white children, or do they raise the children to be who they really abide by those children's own personal histories? And I think that that's a different, I think that it's still very complicated. There's no right and, I think it's a complicated issue. I'm not sure that adopting those children in the beginning is a thought to dedication of maintaining white supremacy. I'm going back to Gus's words. I think it's often that those children seem superior to children of color, black children in this country who need adopting, who are in foster homes and need adopting.
Wouldn't it be to the benefit of white supremacy, since white people do not have the will to practice and implement justice, for white people to produce children with themselves and to increase their numbers in order to maintain white supremacy?
Yes.
So why are whites engaging in sexual activity with non-whites and producing children with non-whites, if it would be beneficial for whites to produce more white children amongst themselves?
I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know.
Do you think the reason why you say it's complicated is because it will allow the group in power who are classified as white to continue to practice deception and manipulation on their prey, aka victims?
Do I think that's why I'm saying it's complicated?
Yes.
No, I don't know. I'm saying it's complicated because I think it is filled with emotion. It is filled with lust. It is filled with the sense of power. And I don't think that there is just one reason. So that's why I say it's complicated. I don't think there's a yes or no answer to that question at all. I think it is filled with emotion, and anytime sex is involved in anything, it is complicated.
So you do agree that sex can be used as a weapon of war, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And why do anti-racists who are classified as white willing to speak about white supremacy racism when you agree that white people do not have the will to, one, end white supremacy racism, nor white people have the will to implement and practice justice?
So why am I willing to speak about doing anti-racism work?
Correct. When white people as a whole, as you said, lack the will to implement justice and lack the will to destroy the system of white supremacy racism.
Because I want to do my part as much as I can to make change. And not to do that, as far as I'm concerned, would be wrong, would be immoral, would be unethical, would not be living up to what I believe is right. I wouldn't want to look at myself in the mirror in the mornings or in the afternoons or any other time.
And are your clients, and the clients that you primarily work with, are they majority white people, or they're white as well as non-white people?
Most of my clients organizationally are white, meaning white colleges and universities. I am often called in non-white people to come and deal with my people, and they say that very clear. Come and deal with your people. I'm sick to death of dealing with them.
And why do you primarily work with the academia circle as far as your white clients are concerned?
Because that's what I trained to be, was a professor. That's where my work has always been. I've spent my life in academia, and that's the system. I'm also really a student of how systems work and how to make change and organizational change, how to bring about organizational change. And that system is more complex and more interesting to me than the corporate system. Corporate system, there is someone who says, do this, and you either do it, there are bosses who say, do this, and you either do it or say nothing or you leave. And in my experience, the academic systems, there are people, mainly faculty, who feel like we can say, says who. I mean, that's what we're told, is that we can do, all faculty members, that we can do what we want in classrooms. That, of course, is not true. It doesn't play out like that. In fact, it plays out very differently based on race and on gender, who gets to really do what they want. But I prepared to be a professor and to work inside the institution to tear it down so that it was more just. And instead I've chosen to work outside the system to do the same thing. But I felt like if I stayed inside, I would be selling my soul. And I couldn't bear to do it. It wasn't in my best interest to do that.
And my last question is, what type of measuring system do you have when engaged with your white clients to determine the levels of if white people's behavior are indeed changing to dismantle or to quote-unquote change the system of white supremacy? What measuring stick or guide do you implement to see if there's any progress being made?
Well, there are all kinds. One is to listen frankly to students and faculty of color, to talk about what the climate is, because the climate is and the culture of the organization, and is it changing to make them feel more welcomed and more included? And so that is one of the tools and one of the instruments that I use, is listening to see how those perspectives shift or not. I also look at policies. What policies are, what new policies are implemented to change how people are hired and who's hired, how people are interviewed, who's interviewed, how people get tenure or don't, who gets tenure or not, et cetera, et cetera. So basically, I'm looking not only...
Pardon me, ma'am, but how do you yourself able to measure the changes within white people, not just non-whites or giving non-whites access to a system that's done and, dominated and run by white people, but how are white people themselves changing, and what measurements are you using to see if white people are indeed changing their behavior and how do their change manifest itself?
I think their changes manifest themselves in the policies and procedures and actions that they take. And so I look at, for example, on tenure committees, is that there are tenure committees that are all white, and they are determining the future for people who are not white. How seriously do they take hiring, creating a pool that is inclusive and diverse, and how seriously do they take mentoring to assure that non-white people can grow it to be their most successful, as is made sure for white men and women. And that can be seen in hiring and in retention. That can be seen in the ways that departmental and college and university climates change. It can be experienced in listening to how white people talk about their institutions and the people in those institutions. I was in an institution recently where one of the department chairs said, "We're being overrun by Chinese." Well, I've never been at a place where somebody said we're being overrun by white people. And so it's a combination of looking to see who has been valued and who is valued, who's being successful, not, etc. And so that's some of the, I create matrices to see, and because I have clients over time to see what is changing and what is not. But I believe that you can change systems. And I believe that some systems have changed. Now, is that change maintained? Not always. Often not. But I do appreciate your question about how do you measure. Because if we don't measure, we don't know. And if I can't say, here's how I measure, here's where it was, and here's where it is now, even if that information is anecdotal as opposed to found on a survey, then it's useless. If there's not ongoing evaluation, you might as well not be doing the work.
So in other words, it sounds like you're saying, this is how I'm interpreting it, that this is the next phase or the better phase of quote-unquote integration in order to see more people included within the white structure, more quote-unquote evenly distributed, I guess you can say. But overall, the system of white supremacy, racism still exists, no matter how much change is occurring and more non-white people are allowed, whether it's even distribution of employment, access to information based on policies drawn up by the white institution itself. So white supremacy still exists. It's just better refined. Correct?
I think there's one thing you said that I don't. It's not how I feel. I don't think it's a better system of integration. I think integration was set up to keep white supremacy in place, the way in which it was carried out. And do I think white supremacy still exists? Yes. Do I think that students of color in colleges and that students of color deserve the opportunity to study in those institutions, whether they are filled with supremacy of whiteness, which of course they are, or not? I believe that they deserve that opportunity. That opportunity I believe 100% should not be kept in the hands of white students in white families, because where you study, who you study with, what you do, et cetera, the networks you build set you up for the rest of your life, as well as setting your children up for their lives. So does white supremacy still exist in those institutions? Absolutely yes. Should everyone have the opportunity to have access to that education? Absolutely yes. Will that take care of or undo the supremacy of whiteness? No, absolutely not.
Thank you very much for answering my question.
It's everywhere. You're welcome. Thanks for keeping on trying to get to the point. Thanks.
Well, I'll get one last caller. I did want to ask before I got our last caller in, as much honesty as we can bear, are you now or have you ever engaged in sexual intercourse with a non-white person?
Yes. I don't know that have I had sexual relationships with a non-white person? Yes, but I'm a lesbian. So have I had sexual intercourse? Actually, I have. I had sexual intercourse before I realized I was a lesbian with a non-white person. But have I had a sexual partner who was not white? Yes. And did I recognize every night when we went to sleep in the same bed, and we talked about this, that she was sleeping with the enemy? Yes. I don't know if that answers your question, Gus.
It does. I'm pointing out for listeners, now I would say that right there, the fact that you have had sexual intercourse with it seems like a non-white male and a non-white female. Is that correct?
Yes, I would say sexual relationships. I think when I had intercourse with a black man, I was in college and not conscious of much of anything except that it would make me feel hipper because I was having sex with a black man. But the truth was I wasn't having sex with men much at all. And since that time, which was, 1865, take away 18, 47 years, I haven't had sex with men at all. But I have had sex with a black woman.
All right. I would point that out, I think, when the caller was asking about white people when they are having sex with non-white people and or adopting non-white children, and you said you hadn't thought about it enough or that you didn't feel informed enough to answer that question. I would say that right there, the fact that you have participated in this activity, I would say that right there, in my book, I suspect, is a conscious, willful, deliberate act of racism, white supremacy, because you've been there, done that. You should be able to speak to that from a personal experience, especially if you've been in bed with a non-white person and having dialogue about, yes, you are sleeping with the enemy, a white person. Yes, if this is something that you all talked about, the white supremacy in the bedroom, and then that question gets asked and you say that you don't feel as though you can speak to that or you haven't thought about it enough, I would say that, in my opinion, I suspect that that is just willful, conscious deception of a non-white person and not being honest in answering their question.
So I want to go back to, because I disagree with you in terms of my own, I don't disagree, I can just tell you what I think. I don't, and I wasn't including the adoption of children. I was talking about heterosexual sex across race. And I said I didn't know enough to talk about that because I'm not straight. I don't have those experiences and haven't really, I haven't really had those experiences in a knowledgeable way. So I don't feel that I can talk about that knowledgeably, because I haven't thought enough about my own personal heterosexual behavior. I have thought about my homosexual behavior. And am I clear that there was supremacy, white supremacy in that bedroom? Absolutely. Was that white supremacy also in the bedroom when I was 18 and I had sex with a black man once? Absolutely. Is that why I was having that sex with a black man? I don't know. Is that why I was having sex with a black woman? I don't think so. And was there something unconscious there? Maybe. But I can't speak any more honestly than that. Was that the reason that I became involved with a black woman? No, I fell in love with her. And that's why I went on to say I think it has to do with lust and love. And that's why I can speak, now I'm speaking strictly for myself, that's why it feels complicated and complex. It's not easily distilled into my goal in having a sexual relationship with the African American woman with whom I had that relationship was to increase my sense of superiority of whiteness. Did it do that? Maybe. Was that I fell in love with her. And do I think race had to do with my falling in love with her? I'm sure it did. I thought I think she's beautiful. And so I don't think the answer is simple. And I think it's a bundle of things. And was I maintaining the supremacy of whiteness? I think probably we would both say yes. And maintaining the system of class as well. And I think those were intricate there. And I would say yes. Was that my goal in falling in love with her? I don't believe so. I didn't seek her out because of that.
Right on. I guess number one, I would point out at the beginning we had a hemorrhage of the word diversity. I think in the last 30 minutes we've had a hemorrhage of the word complicated. Just pointing that out. Also the word lust. I just looked it up just to see what definitions were there. It says very strong sexual desire. The next one, a passionate desire for something. And the example, the sentence, a lust for power. The third definition is chiefly theology, a sensual appetite regarded as sinful. Very interesting. That same thing I said. I also wanted to point out, I don't think the terms heterosexual have been used by anyone on the program except yourself. When the caller, when she asked about sex, I don't believe she used the term heterosexual. In my view, I would just reiterate what I said before, that I strongly suspect that you were consciously, deliberately practicing racism, white supremacy, because you could have said everything that you just shared when she asked that question. You could have broken it down, given us the specifics, In my view, I suspect that is a deliberate and willful concealment of pertinent information. You could have said, yes, I had sexual intercourse. I haven't thought about it with a male. I've had sexual relations, to use your term, with a non-white female and shared sleeping with the enemy. You could have shared all that when she asked her question. And the fact that that did not happen, that you chose not to do that, just reiterating what I said, in my opinion, I suspect that is a willful, deliberate act of white supremacy. But, I could be incorrect. The person that called 6151, did you have a question, 6151?
Yeah, sorry about the delay. Yeah, I was the previous call. I had a question. I was speaking to Dr. Kendall, and I was kind of confused. That's the reason I had dialed back in with my phone hung up, but I was kind of confused. I heard when I was asking her a question earlier about white women subject to white men and the system of white supremacy, and she was like, yes, but not only white women, that's women all across the board.
99445. Please leave your name, your number, your message, and the date and time of your call. Thanks so much for calling. Bye-bye.
Got disconnected. Hang on. Yes, you can be heard. Just hang on one second. I got dropped. Both of my lines dropped. I'm trying to get our guest back right now. Give me 2 seconds, and I will get her back on the line.
Okay.
There?
Yes, Dr. Kendall. Sorry about that.
I think, no, that's all right. I think we were disconnected.
Yes, we should be all good. I think they can hear us. The person, last caller that dialed in, 6151, we couldn't hear you. Your line should be open. Did you have a question for Dr. Kendall?
Okay, thanks for getting back with me, Gus and Dr. Kendall. Yeah, the reason I was calling back because I was kind of confused because earlier you stated that white women were subject to white men and the system of white supremacy. And
in the system of male supremacy and white supremacy combined.
Yes, ma'am. But my question was like, not only are white women not subject to white men in the system of male supremacy, one of the women who kicked off the transatlantic slave trade, I'm sure as you know, Queen Isabella of Spain, signed the document that set black men into slavery in the United States. So I don't see if male supremacy was a realistic system, I don't see how a white female could sign a piece of paper sending black men into slavery and black women. And the thing is like, my question again, like you said, that black men have a form of supremacy in the United States or whatever country you want to put it in. But at the same time, you said that we were targeted. We were the most targeted. Later when I got off the phone, like you said, we were the most targeted. When I think the guy was asking you about when were Arabs ever classified as white, and you went all off subject talking about Mexicans and Cubans and stuff like that. And you said that black men were the most targeted.
We're considered the most dangerous.
Okay, the most dangerous. Why we're not white men? Because, like, if we're in the system of male chauvinism, all right, white man, black man, all of us going to be considered the most dangerous. We're the target. We're in the bullseye of the target. The black man was in the bullseye of the target. So if we have this type of system of male supremacy, the black man can stand up and say, hey, we don't want to be in that target. Hey, just take us out of it. Put the white woman in there. We don't feel comfortable with that. You see what I'm saying?
I do. What I'm saying is that there are several systems of supremacy that are in place that work together to keep our systems. And one of those systems...
I'm confused about that, too, because the supreme system is the top dog. It's the number one system. Like, I can't say that, all right, I have a system of economic supremacy. You see what I'm saying? What you would call classism. I can't I have a system of economic supremacy, but at the same time call President Obama a nigger or a liar. You see what I'm saying? Because obviously his economic power don't mean nothing if he's still determined a nigger, regardless of how much money he gets, regardless of how much power he gets, he's still a nigger. So obviously, the only form of supremacy is white supremacy, and everything else is only confusing non-white people, and white supremacists love to do that. You know, I don't think when we were slaves, in fact, I only had to go back when we were slaves. My granddaddy had a cross birth in his yard. Folks used to be lynching everybody. I'm from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Folks used to be getting lynched. My grandmama right now tell me about when black men were being lynched. I don't think then white women were running around saying, oh, look at the black man. He got this system of supremacy, and he just using y'all. Why were y'all doing that then? Why all of a sudden, when it's laws against us being killed, in 1950, like my grandma said, it used to be legal to kill black men and women. So why all of a sudden when the stuff started to slow down and it seemed that black men and black women are just now starting to make some type of leeway and start trying to do something for ourselves, why all of a sudden white women are concerned about black women? Y'all weren't too concerned about them back then. All this compassion.
I don't think we're so concerned about black women.
Well,
I didn't say that white...
No, I mean interrupt.
I didn't say that white women were so concerned about black women.
So who came up with this term male supremacy in order to dilute the word white supremacy and take the blame off of white racist woman and racist man? Who came up with that term? Black women did?
My belief, and
I'm asking you a direct question, not your belief. Who came up with that term, white women or black women? Who came up with that term? Male chauvinism.
With what term?
The term you was using.
With which term? Male supremacy?
Mm-hmm. Was it black women that came up and started the movement?
No.
And started fussing at black men?
I think it's much older than that, and I think it's that men came up with male supremacy. Men saw themselves.
White
men saw themselves as.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Because I'm not as fast. I'm not as fast and smart as everybody else, so I want to slow down a little bit. So you said a white man came up with this idea of male supremacy.
Absolutely.
Oh, so how all of a sudden, when I was asking about were white women subject to white man in the system of racism, you tried to pit it on the black man and an Asian man and every other man and tried to say, well, that's across the board. The white man came up with this idea of, hey, I'm going to dominate you because you have a split. I mean, are you a female? Why pit that on a black person when right now we can't, if we are in a form of supremacy, I guarantee you, Ms. Lady, I don't know you from a can of paint. But I guarantee you, bottom dollar, in the city of Tuscaloosa, if you go for a job, and I go for a job, I'm not going to get it because I'm a black man, and you're not going to not get it because you're a white woman. Do you think that will happen? Or do you really think somebody's going to discriminate?
You're exactly right.
So how
I think you're exactly right.
And the reason I want to go hard on this because I want a final answer because I'm tired of hearing that. So how does a system, just say it does not at all, or tell me how does the system of male supremacy, as you stated, created by white males, how does the system of male supremacy benefit black men in the United States of America?
I think that, and I'm going to get into it. That feels like a really dangerous question, but I can tell you what came up in my head.
Mm-hmm.
I think that men who rape women are not held accountable.
Come on. Oh, my God. Did you really go there? The white woman who is victimhood of a black man raping a black man is a rapist. Not being accountable. What the hell? I mean, excuse me. Let me calm down because I am there.
No. Go ahead.
So let me.
That is because of grief.
What do you mean? What do you mean? Black men are not held accountable when black men now
when they rape black women.
What are you talking about? People are being released from jail right now, man. When they saying, okay, the DNA evidence is not true. We have evidence that this person did not do it. They're being held accountable. In fact, we've been killed a long time. And like I said, you so concerned about black women. Why didn't y'all stand up for that lady who got rinsed by that French guy? Why all of you white lesbians wouldn't stand up and outrage them? Since you so concerned about folks getting away with it, why were you not so concerned then? And like I said, I'm being really passionate about it, and I need to calm down. But I find it disgusting. I'm talking about it leaves a bitter taste in my mouth what you doing right now, because I think you are so blatantly racist right now. And I know it does not matter, but that right there is just bitter and it's disgusting that you want to say that. And I have no other use of talking to you, really. I just really wanted to get to the bottom line of who you really are. I mean, my line. Sorry for wasting your time.
You didn't waste my time. You said what you thought, and I'm listening carefully to what you thought. You didn't waste your time. You didn't waste my time. You may feel you've wasted yours, but not mine.
Before we wrap things up, Nafissatou Diallo, the name of the victim, Dominic Strauss-Kahn, was accused of sexually abusing, I think that was 2011, Nafissatou Diallo, black female. Justice, if you had anything final you wanted to get in before we wrap up, did you want to go ahead and ask your question?
I just first wanted to say before I ask my quick question, that's a very good point of what the caller said. Very disgusting. I mean, white people are the ones who created that. I mean, that's just, So my last question for you is...
Wait, just go back and say white people are the ones who created the system of supremacy of men and the system of supremacy of race?
I'm sorry?
I wanted you to fill in the blank of that it's disgusting that white men were the ones that I said that white men were the ones who created the systems of the supremacy of maleness and the supremacy of whiteness. Is that what's disgusting?
No. I didn't really understand what you said, but what is disgusting to me is females in a relationship with another female, males being in a relationship with another male, but sexually, I mean, who would ever think about that? I mean, that's just what's disgusting. Gross.
Well, I'm sorry that you feel that way. There's nothing I can say about that. I'm sorry you feel that way.
How much money do you make talking about the system of white supremacy doing the work you do?
It depends on who my clients are. I do really different work. I go in and work over a long period of time with clients. For some clients, I charge $1,000 a day for, and that's usually a 12 or 14-hour day. And for some clients, I charge $2,500 a day. It depends on who the client is, and it depends on their ability to pay. I don't have a set fee. Do I think that I make my money? I make my money playing my race card? Yes. Do I believe that I often am asked to speak instead of, or to do work, because my usual work is not just speaking, instead of doing work on or choosing a person of color? Yes. What I'm told over and over by non-white people is that I will be heard better. Do I think that that is 100% wrong, crappy stuff? Yes, I do. No question about it.
All right. That will be all for now.
Okie doke.
Pardon?
I'm sorry.
Would you say that the anti-racist sector of business is expanding now with the likes of Tim Wise and you, Dr. Francis?
No, I don't think so. I don't think it's expanding. I think the work of white people at all levels, I think white people are coming to, some white people are working really hard. Is that number going up? I hope so. I do want to say one other thing, and Gus, I don't know if this is okay. You asked me, Gus, why I didn't initially talk about my own sexual relationships with women, and yet Justice, who was part of your group, I guess, has just said that what I do is disgusting. And I think that part of what I went into this conversation believing was that we would act in good faith with each other and telling someone that their behaviors, I can say that my behavior about white supremacy is disgusting. That's absolutely fine, because I think that's right. But telling me that my behavior, my lesbian behavior is disgusting, I think was way off point and not necessary. I didn't come on to talk about sexual orientation, and only talked about it because, although I was hesitant, I only talked about it to try to be more honest, and to be as honest and real as I could.
Right on. I brought you on to discuss racism, white supremacy. I don't think I made any comments about your behavior other than when I said I suspected you of deliberately practicing racism, white supremacy. This has come up before on the program, and I've said then that we are united, independent, we being non-white people. All of the individuals on this call, we function as individuals victims of racism, white supremacy. One of the things that I think is very important for non-white people to not get in debates about things that other non-white people have said, questions, stances that they take. It's been my observation that non-white people, we waste a lot of time fussing with other people. So if you had a problem with something that one of the callers or our co-host had to say, you take that up directly with them. As I told a white woman today.
That's actually what I was trying to do, because I figured that Justice was still there. I wasn't talking. I was speaking directly to Justice. I wasn't speaking.
Cool. You could, because you said my name. You called my name and said Gus. So if you had a problem with that, you can address that directly with her if you had a problem. But you did call my name. That's the only reason. If you had just addressed it to her, I wouldn't even say anything. I would have listened, and that would have been that.
No, I was addressing that to her.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Because you're right. You didn't say anything about that. That wasn't your conversation.
What I will say, though, since this has come up, and I will say that this is also a pattern, white people being able to skillfully, white people being able to assert that they are the victim in a situation. I have seen that happen consistently. I suspect that that could be happening here as well. You asserting that, you have somehow been, you didn't use the term victim, but that's pretty much the suggestion that you have somehow been wronged or mistreated, and that is something that I would say to be on guard against for any non-white people who are listening to the program. I don't think any non-white people here have the power to harm, mistreat Dr. Frances Kendall. I don't think any non-white people here, regardless of their opinion or view on Dr. Kendall, anything that she shared with us this evening, have the ability to stop her from getting speaker engagements, from publishing her material, to get her website taken down. I don't think any non-white people have the ability, the power to do anything to Dr. Kendall other than to say a few words, and that's about it. And I think all the people that have dialed in today have been non-white people, and what we say, what we think is greatly devalued, mostly ignored in the system of white supremacy. So I would just say to be on guard about that. White people.
I agree with everything that you just said, Gus. I think that often, as white lesbians, we talk about being victims as opposed to being supremacists. I agree with everything that you just said. Everything. I don't believe that there are that people of color or non-white people have the power to affect any of that. I agree with you 100%. It hurt my feelings. It didn't hurt my life.
Right on. Right on. You all can visit the website. There were several folks who were commenting during the discussion that they would enjoy continuing the dialogue. We're almost in the overtime, but they would enjoy if you perhaps would be willing to come back and continue, because the conversation has come up before about the quote-unquote lesbian behavior. We've had Mab Segrest on the program as well. Sure, are you familiar with her, Dr. Mab Segrest?
She's an old friend.
Oh,
sure, she's an old friend. We were in North Carolina together.
Okay. She's been on the program as well. We talked about some of this with her as well. But, yeah, if you would be down to make a return visit, it would be grand. We can have more dialogue around this. And I think some of the listeners, they were saying that they were thinking of things. Different ideas were coming to them through the program. So, yeah, if you'd be down to come back, it would be great. I had material I didn't even get a chance to get to from your book.
I'm sure you did. I would be happy to. You bet.
Outstanding. You all can visit the website in the meantime. Again, it's her name, www.franceskendall.com, and it's KENDALL.com. So www.franceskendall.com, Frances with an E, Thoroughly enjoyed hearing from you on the program. Lots to think about.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been a really interesting opportunity. Thank you.
Pleasure was ours. Enjoy the rest of the money. Yeah, Bruce Fine, the money aspect. Yeah, that was. I put that right behind Medgar Evers, and in between the male supremacy, a white person making $2,500 a day for allegedly working against racism, white supremacy. That would be pretty high on the scale of revolting, nauseating, repugnant commentary. I appreciate the honesty, but I mean, Man, that is racism, white supremacy in action right there, folks. Right there, folks. Dr. Francis Kendall.
I think that's right. I agree with you.
Enjoy the rest of your Thursday evening. We will definitely be in touch about having you back on the program. Learned quite a bit, Dr. Kendall. I appreciated the dialogue.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Have a good rest of your evening, and if you're living on the East Coast, your evening's probably over. For those of us on the West Coast, we still have a couple of hours left.
Right on. I will try my best.
Yes, good.
Thank you a bunch, Dr. Kendall. We'll be in touch.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Context of White Supremacy. Wow, we will be back tomorrow. So much to say. We will be back tomorrow. We did our 3 hours, not hanging out to do the dialogue. If folks have anything that was noteworthy about the broadcast that they wanted to touch on, you can save that for the Saturday broadcast. Compensatory call-in, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Hope it was worthy of your Thursday evening. I've been told it was snowing while we were doing the broadcast. White supremacy in full effect all the way around. Wowee. I am going to go lay down and try to see if I can forget the $2,500 figure per day. Incredible. And Kendall. Whoa! Man, oh man. I'm going to have a nap, recoup, and prepare for the 1984 study session tomorrow. Man, oh man. Job well done from the callers. Job well done. Everybody enjoyed it. Visit Justice's website, justdojusticetoday.blogspot.com. justdojusticetoday.blogspot.com. We will be back. We will be back tomorrow. Woo! Man, oh man. Context of White Supremacy. It has been time. Please help us to refine our ability to ask questions. I think that is sorely lacking and a huge weapon to neutralize, counter what racist man, racist woman, and racist child do to us, to confuse us, confound us on a daily basis. Creator, please aid us in becoming much more precise, much more strategic with our use of words and honing our listening skills. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Context of White Supremacy. Signing out.
You're just saying just buckets and buckets of words.